Hi guys, I wanted to do a quick video on colorism as it's been spoken a lot about at the moment. As someone who's mixed race, I already had some knowledge of colorism, not just from researching, but I sort of acknowledged it and I've experienced people say things that are colorist. So before I start babbling on, I wanted to talk firstly about what is colorism, like, and how does that differentiate from racism? So how I would describe it is that colorism is a type of discrimination. It typically exists among people of the same race or ethnicity, and colorism is prejudice based on a specific skin tone, and this would be preferential treatment for lighter skinned people or people of the same race based on their skin color or shade. And it demonstrates a reinforced idea that white skin holds more social, political, economic value and more power. And colorism affects everything from things like pay, careers, opportunities, education, and treatment in society. The first time I'd say I noticed colorism was definitely in terms of beauty, but colorism is evident in entertainment, fashion, and media, but also in like everyday life, like dating and things like that. It's the idea that if you have lighter skin, that you're perceived as more beautiful or you're accepted more. And I've definitely noticed it in things like music. Like if you notice music videos, look at the video vixens in the background of music videos, and you'll notice that the majority of them are lighter skinned black women. And I've also noticed it, oh hello Otis, that's my cat. I've also noticed it alive and well in the music industries. If you look at the success of black women in music, it's Alicia Keys, it's Rihanna, it's Nicki Minaj, it's Mariah Carey, and of course Beyonce. And they're all considered light-skinned black women with major success. And I'd read an article about Matthew Knowles, and he was asked, that's Beyonce's dad by the way, and he was asked if he thought that if Beyonce was darker skinned, would that have impacted her success? And he actually said yes, he thought that it would have impacted her success in the music industry. But the first time I noticed it was in beauty, and it was in drugstore makeup products. I'd noticed how there was literally only one shade for darker skinned women, and it's typically called something like ebony or something, and there's only one choice, which is ridiculous. And I noticed that there was definitely more shades for lighter skinned women like me. That's not to say that I ever found the right shade, because that was rare in drugstore makeup especially. But I definitely noticed that I had more choice, and that was a privilege. So some of you might be thinking, well, where does colorism come from? Like, where does it stem from? Like, how did this happen? Well, many believe that colorism it comes from the belief of white supremacy, and that it can actually be traced or rooted back to slavery in America, when slave masters raped and impregnated black slaves, and their offspring were mixed race or lighter skinned, and they were treated better than the typical darker skinned or black slave because of their white ancestry. Hi Otis. But colorism actually happens globally in many communities across the world. And for example, it happens big in India and Africa, and there's big campaigns for like skin bleaching. They have like billboards and advertisement campaigns everywhere. And it's due to white supremacy. It's the idea that the closer you are to white, the better that you are, or the closer you are to the shade white, the better or the more beautiful you're perceived as. So you might be thinking, like, what does colorism sound like? What does it look like? It could be telling a black child to stay out of the sun because they'll get too dark. It could be refusing to cast a darker skinned black person for TV and film. It could be saying things like, oh, she's pretty for a dark skinned girl, or she's beautiful because she's light skinned, which is wrong. I've actually heard people say this next one in the UK, and it sounds like this. I only want to date light skinned cuties, or I only want to date like a peng lady. I've heard people say that before. And you might be thinking, well, what does that look like in terms of racism? And I found a really good example, and it was a company who doesn't hire black people is racist, but a company who hires black people but prefers them to have a lighter skin tone is colorism. So I thought that helped me get my head around it as well. So hopefully that helps you guys understand it a little bit more in terms of context. Well, you might be thinking, like, how does colorism affect people of color? So people who are light-skinned are typically given more opportunities than those of dark-skinned people. People who are darker skinned are often refused opportunities because they're too dark. It looks like people spending money on things like skin bleaching or skin lightening. People with darker skin being treated unfairly because they're too dark. And it results in darker skinned people having, it damages their self-esteem. It's horrible. It's not right. And it's really troubling that that happens within the black community. I have in the past found myself confused about where I am in the spectrum of skin tone, and I feel like it can be really confusing for many mixed race people. Colorism isn't always a benefit to mixed race or lighter skinned people. I think that's really important to highlight, because many mixed race people, they often feel shunned by the community they feel like they identify most with. And I've experienced this within my own circle. I've heard like, what do you know, you're not really black. And I think it's sometimes like the fact that mixed race people, there's maybe a resentment towards mixed race people or lighter skinned people because of the privilege or the preferential treatment for having lighter skinned. But I also think it's impacted by things like, obviously, first of all, your skin tone, where you live. For example, I live in Northern Ireland, and I feel like my experiences are very different if I was going to be living in the United States. For example, in Northern Ireland, I've never felt like white people especially distinguish the fact that I'm mixed race and I'm actually equal parts black and white. I've always felt black here. I've never felt mixed race. I think that's partly to do with the fact that I have afro hair. My features are black. If you look at my face right now, you can tell I've got a black nose. Well, what's perceived as a black nose, you know, it's wider. My lips are fuller, and I do have a curvier figure as well, which is sometimes associated with black women. And I don't, if you look at me, I don't really have anything that would physically identify myself as white apart from having a lighter shade of skin. But as you can see, like, I'm still brown. Like, I think I'm just a light-skinned black woman. But I think it's really important to highlight that not all mixed race people look the same. Some people have darker skin tones and could be perceived as dark-skinned. Some people have whiter features, like their nose and their eyes and their hair are perceived as whiter. And some mixed race people look so light-skinned that and so ambiguous that they could pass for white or another race perhaps. So I think it's really important to highlight that not all mixed race people have the same experience in life in relation to race. But I acknowledge that it can make lighter skinned Black people or mixed race people feel some type of way. It's really important to acknowledge that you do have a privilege, and try not to get defensive about it. It's real and it's there, but I understand, because just because we have a privilege doesn't mean it always feels like a benefit, because mixed race or lighter skinned people, we do experience racism, and sometimes we do feel shunned by a community we feel like we do identify most with. So I understand it can be hard to hear that we're more privileged. So yeah, I think that's really important to highlight. And thinking about my own experience, I feel like without sounding vain or shallow, I feel like I feel like I don't discriminate on skin tone. I can see beauty in every colour and in every race. And I've always been aware of how mixed race or lighter skinned people are perceived as more beautiful. And I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's fair. I think we all need to raise awareness about colorism and actively challenge it, because I do think it can be an unconscious bias. We're not even aware we're doing it. So yeah, I think that's really important too. And I've been following a lot of comments and conversations online about colorism, and what I've noticed is people say things like lighter skinned Black people shouldn't have as much of a voice on this when it comes to racism and colorism. And I would have to disagree. And just because we're not perceived as Black enough does not mean that we should not speak on these issues. I think it's so important to educate and share our experiences collectively, while also acknowledging and talking about the privilege that lighter skinned Black people experience. I can't change the colour of my skin. This is the skin I was born with. I am Black, but I'm also mixed with white. And I hope that other mixed race people aren't being made to feel like they don't have a voice, or their experiences with racism as mixed race people aren't important. Experiences with racism are all important, but we need to definitely amplify darker skinned people too, and make sure that other people are aware that colorism is an issue within the Black community. It's crucial we recognize our privilege, because it's not fair. But on that note, I wanted to say that Black people don't have it easy. If you're perceived as Black in this world, you will no doubt have experienced or been subject to racism. There's no doubt about that. But at this time, it's so important that we shouldn't be turning ourselves against each other. We should be embracing each other and lifting each other up for all the different shades and skin tones we have within our community. I think that's so important, and we should collectively be amplifying our voices to bring awareness to issues such as colorism, as I feel like many people aren't actually aware that colorism is a thing. And to finish off, I wanted to say that I promise to continue speaking up about these issues that affect people on both sides of my heritage, African American and Northern Irish. So that's me. I'm done rambling about colorism. But hopefully some of you who have never heard about colorism before have learned something new, or it's maybe brought awareness to something that you want to research more and look into more. And I know that not everyone will agree with what I'd said, but that's just my opinion and that's my perception of it. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this, and yeah, say bye, Otis.